We are good. That's what I like to hear. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Friday. I hope everyone's got a fun weekend planned. Nicholas, fun weekend? No? You're gonna have 2 days off school and you're not gonna do anything fun? Oh, awful. You're gonna sleep? What are you guys doing? Well, I guess it's a pandemic, so maybe I can give you a little bit of leeway there. Sophie, you doing anything fun this weekend? No? Noah? Huh? Nothing fun? This? Yes, you're doing something fun? What are you doing?
I'm gonna fix a car.
Okay.
Like, not mechanically, from body damage.
Okay.
My first car.
This is your car, yeah?
No, not mine.
Okay.
My first car I faced.
Okay.
I'll take my family with me to the Thursday.
Nice. Nice. How much damage to the car?
It got a little title. So, like, my friend I told you is a mechanic. I work with him.
Yeah.
He get them from the ICBC, fixed them, and so.
Hmm. Cool. Is it really bad, or have you seen it yet?
Yeah, I see it. It's only the right fender, the bumper is cracked.
Okay.
That's all.
Oh, that should be
Maybe something damaged.
that should be easy for a man of your talents. Okay. That sounds fun.
It is.
I hope the garage is heated. It's going to be chilly.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to say good morning to some people here. Amanpreet is here. Good morning to you. Adon is here. Good morning to you, sir. Hadil is here. Good morning, Hadil. Michelle is here. Good morning. Good morning, Michelle. And yeah, Adon, yeah, quiz ahead. Monday is the quiz. Although I will say very quickly, and obviously Deborah made an announcement a few minutes ago. There's a slim possibility of a snow day, right, on Monday. So check your email and the college website Monday morning. If the college is closed, we'll still do an online class. I'll just do it from my home. If there's no snow day, then it's business as usual. Okay? Right. So yesterday, we were heading into the agricultural revolution, right? So we talked about hunting and gathering and foraging and what kind of hunter-gatherer lives are kind of like. We said that there's two broad categories of foragers that have existed. Simple foragers who have a very simple subsistence strategy where they move around a lot and just eat whatever is there. And complex foragers who are a little more kind of organized about how they collect their food. They target certain things that are available, and then they store them away, which allows them to stay in bigger groups and allows them to move around less, I suppose. And kind of associated with those things are differences in status. So one group, complex foragers, have status, and another group does not. In terms of food storage and in terms of production, right? So simple foragers don't have any stuff. They just have their hunting tools and their clothing, and that's kind of all they own, right? Whereas complex foragers have stuff, right? They have houses, they have boats sometimes, they have masks and ceremonial robes and boxes and all kinds of totem poles and all kinds of things that they make because they're able to stay in one place and they don't have to carry everything they own with them around every day.
Can we say that complex foragers have culture, whereas hunter-gatherers are not?
Absolutely not.
Why?
Because what did we say that culture was? How do we define it?
Everything that we do and think.
Well, yeah, it's everything that we do and we think. And officially we said it was a shared system of beliefs, values, behaviors, and artifacts that are common to a group. And so those simple foragers, they have a culture as well, right? They have beliefs and values and norms for behavior. They have skills that they teach to their children. They have pieces of technology that they use to survive. And so, yeah, they have culture as well, right? yeah, they have a culture. They have a culture just the same as we do.
But it might be like easy to be forgotten.
It's very easy to be forgotten because, for the most part, none of these groups write anything down.
Yeah.
So,
Even they left something behind, as you said, like it's very hard to get something they have left.
yeah,
Only they leave is food.
yeah. So they rely very heavily on passing down culture orally, right? In terms of teaching people and in terms of storytelling, right? That's how that knowledge is transmitted. And so, yeah, they rely on word of mouth, right? They rely on teachings being passed down and stories being passed down. That's how that culture is transmitted. So yeah, there's very little in the way of material culture, right? Because they just don't need that many things to survive, but all of their skills are kind of not. Yeah, there's not a lot of tangible objects, right? It's all knowledge and skill and stories and all of this stuff. And that's, for the most part, that's really what culture is. You know, we live in a world where we've created a lot of material culture, right? We have a lot of stuff, right? People's houses are filled with stuff. But these are cultures that don't have that much material culture. There's not as much stuff, but there's still, you know, the culture itself is still, it's still a culture. It's still a culture, but probably one that would be very different to live in as compared to maybe what most of us are used to, but yeah, it's still a culture. Right, so there was two types, and we said that today there's not many people who hunt and gather anymore, and the problem is not the problem, but the reason for that is that people switch to agriculture, and agriculture is the way that most of the world gets their food today, right? And so we said about 12,000 years ago, people in some parts of the world start to move to an agricultural subsistence strategy. They start to grow their own food. And I tried to convince you that, or not convince you, but I said that this was basically the biggest change that humans have ever gone through, right? Changing our subsistence strategy after 300,000 years as hunter-gatherers is a big deal. It's a big change. And the fact that this happened is really what has allowed the modern world that we live in to exist, right? Without the agricultural revolution, none of this happens, right? None of the technology we have, none of our way of life, none of it happens without this. And you may or may not believe me on that, but I'll try to convince you as we go forward. We said that some places in the world switched to agriculture at different times, right? So some places switched earlier than later. But it's also worthy of pointing out that some places don't switch at all, right? So the indigenous people who live here in the Vancouver area in the West Coast, they never switched to agriculture. They were hunters and gatherers all the way to the point where Europeans came here and kind of took over the place and sort of pushed them aside. But they were never farmers. They were hunter and gatherers right up until 200 years ago, right? And in some ways they still try to practice that subsistence strategy as best they can, living in a modern context like we live in. But yeah, so some places switch early, some places switch later, some places don't switch at all, right? So it's a revolution that happens in different places at different times. We said it's difficult to know what happened during this period because we don't have a huge amount from the archaeological record, we don't have any written records, and this was probably a slow process, right? I said that foragers didn't wake up one morning and say, okay, farms are the way to go. That doesn't happen. It probably took generations for them to transition from full hunter-gatherer to full-time farmers, right? That's a long, slow process. Oops. So to sort of explore why and how this happened, we read this article here, Jared Diamond, The Worst Mistake in the History of the Human Race, No, it wasn't the Kardashians. It was something else. No, I don't know. I'm not trying to insult the Kardashians. I'm just trying to be funny. So we read this article, and I asked you to come up with the arguments. So can I give you 3 or 4 minutes just to look over that one more time and sort of remind yourself of what was in the article, and then we can talk about it? Can we do that? Yes? No? Maybe so? Okay, that's what we're going to do. So I'm just going to give you a few minutes here. I'll put a few minutes on the clock, not 42 minutes. And then look over the article again. Look over the article again, and then we'll discuss. Okay, so as I mentioned to you yesterday, this paper has a couple of arguments in it, right? And so Jared Diamond is going to try and convince us of something. He's going to present present us with his argument, but he's also going to talk about the old argument too, right? So he says, this is what people used to think. This is their argument. However, I think that's junk, right? I think this is the way it is, right? And he's going to give us his argument. So let's start with the old argument, the progressivist argument. What's the conclusion of that argument? What is the main point?
We got better when we abandoned origin.
Yeah, I might move some words around if that's okay, but yeah, so the progressivists say that, of course, we turned to agriculture because that was progress, right? That was obviously a better solution to getting food, right? Obviously. And did things get better? Arguably. Arguably, but the progressivists think that they did, right? Of course people turn to agriculture. It's just better, right? And so if that's the conclusion, then what are the reasons to support that? What makes agriculture, according to the progressivists, what makes it so much better than hunting and gathering?
It's in one place you don't have always to travel.
Yeah, hunter-gatherers move sometimes 10 kilometers a day. Does that sound like a lot to you?
Yeah.
All day, every day, day after day? Yeah, you'd be walking 70 kilometers a week, right? That's a lot of walking, right? And so sounds exhausting. With agriculture, your food is right there, right? You just open your back door and there's your field, right, of wheat or whatever it is, right? So your food's right there. You don't have to constantly go searching for it. Ugh, what a drag. What else did they say?
Gave us more free time so we can develop more culture.
Yeah. So the progressivists say that, because we didn't have to walk and search for food all day long, we had lots of free time, right? The crops are growing in the fields, easy peasy. We can sit around and do other things like create art, write symphonies, build the Parthenon. What's the Parthenon? You know what the Parthenon is? No? It's that thing in Athens, it's like that big temple on the top of the hill. Have you ever seen pictures?
Don't you show us with the Aztecs?
No, it's an old Greek temple in Athens. Anyway, it's a bit. We'll see pictures of it later. It's a big temple. It's very impressive. It's a wonder of the ancient world, I believe. UNESCO World Heritage Site. Right. So the progressivists say, yeah, we had all this free time, then we could devote it to other things like technology and building and art and literature and things like that. Right. Farming made that happen, says the progressivists. What else? Why else did people turn to agriculture? Why was agriculture so great?
You have more than one kind to eat, like other than meat?
I don't, well, probably not, because we know that most hunter-gatherers have a very wide-ranging diet. They eat a lot of different things, right? Farmers tend to eat less because they eat a lot of their crop.
Yes, you can store it.
Yeah, you can store it, right? So hunter-gatherers, at least simple ones, they're always moving around and they don't really store any food. So you come to a place as a hunter-gatherer and you gather and hunt and get some food together, but that's kind of it, right? Like you don't have food for tomorrow or the day after or the next week. You're going to have to keep finding it, right? So isn't it kind of nice to open the fridge and the fridge is full? It's like, yeah, look at all this food, right? That's a very comforting feeling. It's not a comforting feeling when you're hungry and you open the fridge and you've got mustard, right? That's not a comforting feeling, right? So, yeah, so the progressivists say, yes, agriculture was great because you could store food. You could feel relaxed in the idea that it's okay because we have this big silo full of grain or millet or whatever, rice or whatever the crop was stored away. So we know we have food for tomorrow and next week and the week after that. Why else was agriculture so great?
It helped with increasing our population because there's so much food and we can
Right. Agriculture does feed more people on a given section of land, right? You can feed more people with agriculture. So you can feed more people from the land with farming rather than hunting and gathering, right? Nature only produces so much. What else? Why else was agriculture so great? I think that almost might be it, but I'm just trying to think if there's anything else.
You can use like farms to keep animals.
I don't think he mentions that, but it's true, right? Yeah, people who farmed often kept animals as well, right? Chickens and pigs and things like that, horses.
Instead of being hunter and gatherer, you can just be a picker and gatherer.
Yeah, you could.
Pick whatever you want from your farm.
Yeah, you have your own food right there, right? Okay, so that's the progressivist approach. Now, Jared Diamond is going to say that Jared kind of goes through these things, and can we agree that those would all be logical reasons why someone might want to farm? Yeah, right. It's easier, gives you more free time, gives you more food. There's food security, right? You've got a store of food right there. You don't have to walk, days on end to find more food. All of those things are reasons why someone might want to farm, right? I think we could intuitively say that. But are they all true? That's the question. Yeah, so Jared takes issue with some of these things, right? So the first thing we said is that agriculture was, what was the first thing we came up with? Should have written, what's that?
You mean like
Yeah, okay, so yeah, agriculture results in more free time, right? So that they could build the Parthenon and, create artwork. Is that true?
Yeah. Well, because if you are a hunter and gatherer, imagine you do not find your meat or your prey to eat at the beginning of the day. You will keep searching until like the sunset. If you do not get it, you lost it.
It's true, right? So there's potentially a little bit less certainty in terms of whether you will find food. Although keep in mind these people are very good at finding food and will eat anything, almost. But remember when we said that hunting and gathering takes up only about 15 or 18 hours a week, right? Working on a farm is a lot more work, right? You've got to collect the harvest, and then you've got to turn over the land again. You've got to replant. You've got to weed it. You've got to build fences to keep the predators out, or not the predators, but the animals from eating your crop. And then you've got to make sure that everything's watered all the time. And then when things are ripe, you've got to harvest the crop. And then when the crop is harvested, you have to process it, right? You don't just eat wheat, off the plant, right? You've got to grind it and make it into bread or some kind of bread. There's actually a lot of work that goes into farming. And so the progressivist premise that, farming is so much easier and less work, it's definitely not. And for us today, it's less manpower work, but we use a lot of machines and technology to get that work done, right? So we have to imagine people thousands of years ago who were working their own farms with nothing, right? We're with a stick or a shovel and maybe a bag and their bare hands, right? It's a lot of work. People spend a lot of time in the fields tending to the crops, watering the crops, carrying water buckets to water their crops, building fences and maintaining them, processing the wheat or the rice or whatever it is. It's a lot of work that goes in, right? And so actually farming is more work than hunting and gathering. Just seems like less because most of us don't do it. And if we are farmers, we tend to use modern technology to get the work done. But it's a lot of work. Is it true that you can store your food? Yeah, it is true that you can store your food when you farm. So that's a good premise. But Jared Diamond also points out that sometimes crops fail, right? If you get bad weather, if you get pests or insects or locusts or fungus or some sort of thing, too much sun, not enough rain, all these things can happen. And what happens if your crop fails? You have no more food for the rest of the year. How's that sound? Miserable, right? I don't know about you guys, but I don't think I can go a full year without food. I can maybe go, actually, I think I could probably go,
15 days, that's all.
yeah, I could probably do a couple of weeks, maybe 3. But after that,
Bye-bye.
yeah, bye-bye, right? So having no food for an entire year is a devastating disaster, right? You and your family are going to starve. You may die if you don't have food put away from previous years. Disaster, right? Does that happen to hunter-gatherers, do you think?
No.
Why not?
No, it does, but when animal travel, they eat everything.
Mm-hmm. They eat everything, right? Gosh, there's no rabbits here. I can't find any rabbits. Whatever, we'll eat something else. We'll catch some fish or, dig for beetle grubs or, look for honey or mushrooms or whatever, right? So hunter-gatherers, if you rely on one crop, rice, wheat, potatoes, corn, whatever it is, and the crop fails, that's like 80 or 90% of your food is gone, right? For hunter-gatherers, if they can't find something of one thing, there's always something else, right? They just switch. There's always some sort of food available if you eat a wide variety of things. So, hunter-gatherers are almost famine-proof in a way because they've got such a diverse selection of foods. But when early farmers are heavily relying on one crop, and if that crop fails, it's bad news, right? They're serious, serious trouble. What else? So, okay, so the free time thing turns out not to be true.
But it's only the farmer's the only one who's doing the work. People who aren't farming actually have more free time.
Yes, but in the early days of farming, and we'll get to that. That's an excellent point, and we'll come to that very shortly. In the early days of society, basically everyone's only growing enough food to feed themselves, right? So you have a very simple farm. You're working your little farm on your own. You're growing food for your family, and so kind of everyone's a farmer. So we don't have different people doing different things like you're suggesting. That actually comes later. So you're a little bit ahead of the curve, but we'll get to that. So actually it is more work. There is the danger of famine. There actually turns out to be less free time available. Farmers work longer hours than hunter-gatherers do. So let's turn to his argument, right? So he's trying to refute this progressivist idea. And what does Diamond say? What's the conclusion of Jared Diamond's argument?
Switching to farming was not something they chose to do. They were forced to switch.
Right. Let's see. I think that is true, and I think that's almost more part of the explanation part of this, like the last question I asked you about what's his explanation for this. So I think you've got a piece of the puzzle there, but I think it comes a little bit later. So let's put a pin in that one, and we'll come back to it at the end. But what's he trying to convince us of here?
The fact
The title. Yeah, the titles can be a good clue as to what the main point of something is, right? And here, he's not being sneaky about it. He's clearly telling you this is the worst mistake we've ever made, right? Which,
From hunting into farming.
yeah, and that's a bold statement, right? And of course, he's trying to get your attention with it. But yeah, that's basically the conclusion of his argument: is that this agricultural revolution, this switch from hunting and gathering to farming, we shouldn't have done that. That was well, maybe not shouldn't have, but that had negative consequences for us, right? That wasn't a good move. So why does he want us to believe that switching to agriculture was a mistake?
People aren't getting as much nutrition as they used to.
Right. So one of the things he points out, and this is kind of a health thing, is nutrition, right? And so hunter-gatherers, it turns out, are very healthy and get excellent nutrition because they eat such a wide variety of different foods, right? They're getting all kinds of proteins and amino acids and fatty acids and different carbohydrates and vitamins and minerals. They're eating all kinds of things. And what does he say about crops like wheat and millet and stuff like that?
But not equal to the same nutrition that animals provide.
Definitely not. And you can try this on your own. If you go to the grocery store or if you go online and look at sort of the nutrition you'll find in, flour, let's say wheat flour, versus basically any natural food, you will find that in natural foods, the vitamins and minerals and things are off the charts, right? They're super high in everything you need. But things like wheat actually they have calories, right? So your body can metabolize them and burn them, but there's just not that much there in terms of nutrition. And a lot of times what you'll see is things like rice or wheat flour, things like that, they'll be fortified. So the company will actually add vitamins and minerals into it because naturally it's just not much there, right? It's fuel, you can burn it and keep yourself alive, but there's not really that much there that your body needs, right? Whereas if you look at any animal food, any kind of plant food like vegetables or fruits or nuts or seeds or berries, any of those, you'll find that they vary in terms of what kind of vitamins and minerals they have, but the levels are quite high. And so comparing a diet that's mostly wheat or mostly rice with one that, say, hunter-gatherers would have had, they're very different. And so early farmers were not getting the same kind of nutrition that the hunter-gatherers were. What else does he say about why this was a mistake?
Hierarchy and sexism.
Yeah. So he's pointing the finger at sexism and sexual inequality. He's saying that comes from agriculture, right? How does he explain that?
You have more crops, you are food short.
That might be the class divisions thing. But what about the sexism thing? How do women lose power? They what?
In some places, I think I saw that because they need more hands to till the crops or something. They need to make more babies, so that's when
Yeah.
the women come in.
Exactly. So, like we said before, farming's a lot of work, right? You need a lot of hands. And so the best way to get more hands, more babies, right? Because they're free labor. You can just you just tell your kids what to do and they have to do it, right? So you can create your own little farming workforce if you keep popping out these kids, which a lot of farming families do. Agricultural families tend to be larger and have more kids than hunter-gatherer families. And think about it. If you had to walk 10 kilometers a day, every day, can you have 3 tiny little kids with you? No. Have you ever seen like those mothers in Walmart that have 3 little kids and they're trying to get the grocery shopping done and one kid is grabbing stuff and the other kid's having a meltdown, and one's like attached to her leg and she's trying to like drag that. Like, you can't get anything done with 3 little kids, and you certainly can't walk 10 kilometers a day with a bunch of little ones, right? So hunter-gatherers work very hard to keep their numbers low, but also to kind of space out when women give birth. And so hunter-gatherer women try to give birth only maybe once every 4 or 5 years. And so
Do that, like, there isn't condoms or birth control, how do they do that?
it's true. And one of the things that they do, and the question, of course, is how do you do that? Because there's no condoms, there's no birth control, and there's probably a very limited idea of how the human reproductive system operates, right? Of course, they'll have an explanation for it, but it won't be a scientific one, and it probably won't be correct. One of the things that they do, and I have a slide on this later, is that hunter-gatherer mothers will often wean their children very late. Do you know what weaning is? When you wean a child? Nope. Nope. Do you know, Sophie? No. When you wean a child, that's when you kind of, they stop living on breast milk and they start eating real food, like solid food. So here in the West, we kind of do it at varying level or varying times, but we do it actually pretty early. Hunter-gatherer mothers sometimes will breastfeed their kids for 3 or 4 years even. And what's happening during that time, as it turns out, breast milk is super nutritious. It's got all kinds of great minerals. It's good for your immune function. It's like, for babies, it's a superfood. Like, it's excellent. But when a woman is breastfeeding, her body is releasing hormones that makes it less likely, not impossible, but less likely that she will get pregnant again, right? Because the body is like, oh, we still have a baby, we're still feeding this baby and taking care of it. Let's not have another one, right? So again, it's not 100% foolproof, but on average, it does work out to the fact that hunter-gatherer mothers have their kids much further apart, whereas agricultural communities tend to pop them out because having a lot of children is desirable, and they tend to wean them earlier. So they tend to move them onto solid food earlier. And so farmer families tend to get very big. Hunter-gatherer communities have a lot of interest in staying small and just having one child at a time, because you have to carry this child with you everywhere. And so, if you had a choice, you would want to, only have a second child when that first child can walk and keep up on their own, right? You don't have to carry them everywhere. So, so that had to do with sexism. So if a woman is having 6, 7, 8, 9 children, really, what's going to be her job? And she's going to be in the home, right? Taking care of the home, taking care of all of these kids, and kind of prepping the meals, right? And who's in charge of production? Who's in charge of the food supply? The men are, right? And it's not to say that women don't contribute to farming activities, because they absolutely do. But they kind of lose a bit of status and power in that process, right? Before, with hunter-gatherers, women are critically important, right? They're out there gathering every day, and they're probably the ones that are contributing the stable food supply, right? Men are bringing the meat when they're successful, and they're not always going to be, right? So women are consistently feeding the group and, at least providing half of the calories, if not more. So they're an important, respected part of that group, and they have equal status with men, more or less. But as they kind of lose their ability to contribute to the production and the food supply, they kind of lose some power as well. That's kind of what Jared Diamond is arguing here.
I think that's wrong.
Yeah?
That's like totally wrong. I'm like, that is a stereotype that's been educating for hundreds of years to us, like women has less status. Why is that like? It's not like
It absolutely is.
Well, if the man, let's say like wise man, not like, I don't want to say stupid, but like,
Keep in mind, we're talking thousands of years ago here.
yeah,
Okay.
they also could think, okay, if we don't have babies, I can't farm anymore, I can't eat, I can't survive, humanity will vanish,
True.
right? Well, that does not belittle the woman.
No. The other thing that might be connected to this as well, and it's connected to that social status thing, is the ability to own land. Okay? So most farmers have the sort of cultural belief that you can own the land. Okay? And I think we're all pretty comfortable. We all come from cultures where land is owned, right? You buy a house, it's your land, right? That's how it is. But hunter-gatherers don't have that same conception. Hunter-gatherers, they feel that you can't own the land, like it's ridiculous, right? Because they're part of the land. The land takes care of them, right? The land is almost like their mother. It provides for them. Can you own your mother?
No.
No. Can you sell your mother?
Not in modern times.
Not in modern times, right? Yeah, as you can't own these. Can I own the air? No, right? So hunter-gatherers kind of think about the land this way, right? That they're a part of it, right? They belong to it, not the other way around. So if you're a farmer, if I own the land and my wife doesn't want to do what I want her to do and I kick her out, where's she going to get food? Nowhere, right? The land belongs to me. And so we kind of see both of these things happening, right? Is that this conception of ownership of land happens. We have the ability of men and then elite men to control the food supply, to control who has food. And that is what changes the sort of egalitarian nature of hunter-gatherers, right? There's no way to do that in a hunter-gatherer society because you can just go out and get food, right? If you're having trouble with your husband and your husband's being a jerk, he can't keep you from eating because you just wander off into the forest and find the food that you need. He can't do that to you. But when we start to see agricultural communities developing, we start to see land ownership, control over the food supply, and then when you have control over the food supply, you can make people do things that don't have that control, right? Or don't have that land. And so that's kind of linked to his third premise, where you have social hierarchies appearing, right? Some people manage to get control of land, control of food, and then they have power over others, and they can make them do things, right? And so then you have like nobility, right? You have nobles who own the land and peasants who work the land, right? This kind of develops in that way. But again, hunter-gatherers, you can't do that because anybody can just wander off and find the food they need. You don't have that leverage over people the same way as you have in an agricultural community. So he's almost saying these two are a little bit connected, right? In that agricultural communities develop social inequality. There's people with power and people with less. And he sees it happen on gender lines as well. Men gain power and women lose a little bit, right? That's his argument anyway. Whether you believe it or not is another story, but that's what he's saying.
Also, that does not make sense. Imagine like a woman or a man just wanders off from the group. Then, let's say it's only one family. They are hunting and gathering. One person or woman better like just leave them. Let's say they only have children as males. If the woman just leaves, the other group will die. She will die also. There are no more like babies, no more like other humans.
It's true, and one of the things we'll get to as well is that as this agricultural thing goes on, hunting and gathering becomes less and less of an option, okay? Because as farmers start to modify the landscape, They burn down trees, they create crops. If any predators come around, you shoot the predators. If any tasty animals come around, you shoot them too and eat them. Well, I shouldn't make a gun motion because guns haven't been invented yet. But maybe you hunt the deer and kill them. So as people start to stay in one place for one time, the amount of naturally occurring food goes down, right? And so think about modern day Vancouver. If everyone in Vancouver tomorrow decided to switch to hunting and gathering, how long do you think the food would last?
You can hunt and gather in supermarkets.
Supermarkets are gone. I snap my fingers. There's no supermarkets. There's no food stores. Everybody is hunting and gathering tomorrow. How long do you think before we go hungry? 1 year? Ooh boy, you're very optimistic. I think we'd be out of food in a few days because there's just not. What kind of naturally occurring food is there here? What would you eat? There's lots of these crows around, right? We could eat the crows, but I mean,
Ducks.
what's that?
Ducks.
Yeah, okay, but there's 1 million people in this city, let's say, right? How long are those crows and dogs going to feed people if they choose to kill their dogs?
Not dogs. Ducks.
Oh, ducks. Okay, sorry. Well, dogs maybe too. But yeah, so there's crows, there's ducks, there's seagulls, there's geese, if you can catch them. Let's just say you can. Actually, the geese might be pretty easy because nobody hassles them, so they're not really, they're pretty confident. But still, there's just not that much naturally occurring food, right? We've totally changed this environment. We've paved over most of it. We've planted trees that, for the most part, are not edible or don't produce anything edible. What's that?
Maple syrup.
Maple syrup. Yeah, you need a special type of tree for that, though, and it's only at certain times of the year. I think you can.
Takes a lot of time to.
And it's a lot of work.
Process.
Yeah, and you've got to process it, right? Yeah. So I think that we would be reasonably unsuccessful as hunter-gatherers and that the food would run out really quickly because there's a lot of us people and there's just not that much naturally occurring food in this city, right? And so a similar thing would have happened to early farming communities, is that they would have changed their landscape because they were in one place for a long time. They would have eaten anything that was really edible. And so you might have to go a long distance to find animal communities that you would survive off of. And the other thing is that, those knowledge and the knowledge and skills that hunter-gatherers have, people start to forget those things, right? Because they're living a new style of existence. Do you know how to hunt and gather? I don't. Well, I do with a gun, right? But if I don't have a gun, I don't know how to find food up there. I can't go up into the mountains and live. I will die. I don't know how to catch any wild animals. I don't know how to go fishing without a fishing rod. I don't know which mushrooms are poisonous and which ones aren't, or which berries are poisonous and which ones aren't. That knowledge gets lost because people don't need it anymore. What they need is they need to know how to farm. They need to know how to plant their crops and harvest and store and, all that kind of thing. And so people have a different knowledge base, and so they lose the ability to switch back, right? And so again, if you don't have access to farmland, either if you don't own land or if you aren't able to work on somebody else's land, you're going to go hungry, right? There's going to be no food for you. There's going to be no way for you to earn a living. And so, yeah, we see these social inequalities develop, and gender is one of those social inequalities. So says Jared Diamond. Okay, so there's more to talk about here, of course, but let's take a little break because we've been working hard for the past while. So take 10, come back, and I have a few more questions on the health aspect of Jared Diamond's argument, but take 10 first. Okay, and we're back. So in this reasonably brief article, we've identified two different arguments, right? Jared Diamond has identified a progressivist argument earlier that said, of course, hunter-gatherers switched to agriculture. Agriculture is so great and easy and productive. Of course they did it, right? They'd be fools not to. Whereas Jared Diamond here is outlining his argument saying, actually, the switch to agriculture was kind of not so great initially, right? There were some problems. And Jared Diamond has suggested that sexual inequality kind of begins with this switch to agriculture, and he argues that class divisions start to appear with the switch to agriculture as well. I want to circle back to health because we mentioned that, well, what kind of data does he have to support the idea that farming was less healthy or had a negative effect on health? Bone growth. Okay. So what kind of statistic? Well, not statistic, but what kind of data does he cite?
Hunter-gatherers are taller than farmers.
Yeah. So they have skeletons from, I think it's from Cyprus, and so they're from different time periods. So they're genetically kind of the same people, but at one point they were hunter-gatherers, and then thousands of years later they were farmers, right? Same genetic people basically, but you measure their height that they grew to and you find an average height of, what was it? Hunter-gatherers were
5 feet for women and 5'6" for men, I think.
I think it was, well, for the hunter-gatherers, I think it was 5'6" for women, and I think it was 5'9" for men. So, and that's pretty good. That's like here in Canada, that's about where we are now. So the average height for men is about 5'9", 5'10", and the average height for women is about 5'6", give or take, 5'5", 5'6". What was it for the farmers, the early farmers?
5'6" for the men and 5 for the women.
I think it was even shorter than that.
No, so it is. I think for women, 100% for that. Yeah.
What was it?
5 for men and 5 for women.
Oh no.
What?
No, it was 5'5" for women. It was 5'3" for men, and 5 feet for women, on average. That's the average. So these people are quite a bit shorter than the hunter-gatherers that came before them, are they not? Pretty.
Can we talk in the language of meters? Because
The language of.
meters.
Ooh.
Yeah, because 5'3" and 5'6", oh, that's not like 0.3, that's
Sorry. Canada's weird that way because we're a metric country, but for some things we still deal with imperial measurements.
yeah.
And yeah, like Canada's weird. We constantly go back and forth between the two. You know, I don't know how many centimeters tall I am or how many kilograms I weigh,
What?
but I know how fast 60 kilometers an hour is. So
But like, how do you say it on your like driver license?
yeah, well, we say it on the driver's license in centimeters, but I always have to like convert on the computer because I don't know how many centimeters tall I am.
Okay, so can you like put,
Yeah,
show us
well,
the difference between
okay.
5'9" and 5'3"?
Okay, so sorry, online people, you won't be able to see this. So 5'9", so I'm 6'1", so 5'9" is probably about here, maybe, yeah, about there. And so that's the hunter-gatherer men on average, and the women at 5'5" is probably about there. It's hard to know. I don't have a tape measure on me. In terms of 5'3" is about here. Sorry, so 5'9", 5'3" is about here, and 5 feet is about there, give or take.
I'm around 5 feet.
You're 5 feet?
Yeah.
Do you want to come up and model for us? Does anyone know they're 5'9"? Adel, you're too tall for sure. Is anyone 5'9" here? You might be close to that.
I'm close to it.
Okay. So this is 5 feet. There's probably a little bit of like,
Yeah.
you know, toque height there. But so Sophie's 5 feet. I'm 6'1". What, are you 5'9"?
Yeah.
You could tell just by looking at him?
Yeah.
If you are 6'1",
If I'm 6'1", okay. Oh, you're pretty close to my height.
5'9".
I think we're
probably 6.
I think we're the same height. You've got some hair height that I don't have, but I think we're pretty close.
Yeah, something.
So, yeah, so hunter-gatherer men would have been on average, a little bit shorter than Baha and I. But again, contrast that to Sophie, where early farmers were on average quite a bit smaller than their hunter-gatherer predecessors, right? And so part of that is genetic, of course, right? So we all have kind of a predetermined height that we'll grow to because of our genetics, and that comes from our parents. But part of it is also nutritional, right? And if you don't have enough nutrition, you're not going to grow to your genetically programmed height. And that's probably what's happening with these farmers. They're not getting good nutrition, and so they're not growing as tall as their earlier hunter-gatherer relatives, right? And again, these are genetically roughly the same people, right? They come from the same part of the world, and again, these are averages, right? So we're seeing a decrease in height. What else are we seeing?
Lifespan, decrease in lifespan.
Yeah, a decrease in the average lifespan. What did they say the lifespan went from?
Went from 26 to 19, I think.
Ooh, yeah. So the average lifespan of hunter-gatherers was calculated to be 26 years of age, and for farmers, it went down to 19. Does that mean that, like, after 20, everybody died? Would you all be old people in this farming community?
But according to Tim, that's old. Like, if you reach 30, oh, you are old.
Well, that's definitely one part of it, right? So one part of this is that, yeah, people just did not live quite as long as we do now, especially because they didn't have any sort of medical interventions like we do now. We can really keep people alive for a long time. Thousands of years ago, you couldn't do it. The other thing I'll mention to you is that infant mortality, so children dying either in childbirth or before the age of 2, was much, much higher in the past. And so what that tends to do is it pulls the average down, because so many kids die before the age of 2, the average gets pulled way down. So, you know, even at 26, it's not as if, you're dead by 30 sort of thing. There were people who lived into their 40s and 50s, and maybe if they were lucky even to their 60s. But so many children were dying young that the average gets pulled down. Okay, so it seems younger than it should be, but still, our average life expectancy today, what is it?
60.
Well, depending on the country you come from, right? But here in Canada, it's close to 80. It's right around 80. So these guys clearly had shorter lives than us, no question. But that's a pretty big drop, right? That's a 6-year drop in average life expectancy on average. What else? What else do they see for evidence of poor health? If you had written something down, it would be easier to remember. I'm just saying.
Their teeth.
Huh?
Their teeth.
Teeth. Yeah, what's the deal with their teeth?
They lose more teeth.
They what?
They lose more teeth.
Yeah, so there's a couple things going on with teeth that might be interesting. One of which is that farmers tend to have really bad teeth. Okay, so they eat a lot of starchy stuff, right? Starchy vegetables and bread. That stuff gets stuck to their teeth. Toothbrushes aren't really invented yet. And so they actually get a lot of cavities and a lot of dental infections. They lose a lot of teeth. They have bad teeth usually. Hunter-gatherers, interestingly enough, usually have great teeth, even though they haven't invented toothbrushes either. But they don't eat so much. They don't eat a lot of starchy stuff, and they don't eat a lot of sugary stuff. And so their teeth tend to have less of that, the the types of kind of food on their teeth that bacteria and plaque like to eat or feed on, and so they tend to have really good teeth. The other thing about farmers is that with wheat, you have to grind it, right? You have to grind it to make bread and grind it to make flour. Farmers would do this with stone, right? So they'd have a stone and they would grind their wheat into flour. But in doing so, they would also grind part of the rock, right? So a lot of their bread has like a very fine sand in it, almost. It's gritty. And so if you imagined, if you were eating bread at every meal that was mixed with a very fine sand, minerals, but it wears your teeth down, right? It's like sandpaper on your teeth every time you have a meal. And so early farmers tend to have their teeth worn down as well because of this, in a way that hunter-gatherers don't. But there's something else they mentioned too, something about the enamel. Yeah. What?
Epidemics.
Oh, yeah, let's get to epidemics in a second, but let's talk, because I want to finish with the teeth. What's going on with the teeth?
I would think like hunter-gatherers have like more stronger jaws.
They actually do. They actually do have stronger jaws. That's actually something that's happened through the course of human evolution, is that our jaws and our teeth have gotten smaller. Because we just don't eat, the food we eat is not as tough as it was thousands or millions of years ago. So if you look at, you remember we looked at some of our fossil hominid ancestors, they all have really big jaws and big teeth as compared to what we have. And so our jaw and our teeth have been kind of shrinking over time because we just don't need such big teeth. What do they say about the teeth, the enamel? What's that? Well, there's no, what it is they use this, he talks about enamel hypoplasia, okay? And this is a word I would not ask you on an exam, but have you ever heard it? No? So what happens is when your teeth are forming when you're a little baby, they're forming inside your gums, right? And so eventually, you know, the tooth that's growing in your gums pushes out the baby tooth, right? And then your adult tooth comes in, right? We all remember this. It's kind of gross, actually, but that's how it works, right? But before that's happened, so when you still have your baby teeth, your adult teeth are starting to form in your gums, and your body is basically mineralizing the teeth. They're basically forming a rock in your mouth. That's basically what your body is doing. And so, but it's of course using nutrients and minerals from your food. And so what happens if you go through a period where your crop fails and there's no food? No food, no minerals. And so the body kind of shuts down enamel production for a little while. And then when you start to get food again, it starts to mineralize those things again. And so what you can get is, you see these little ridges, these little lines here? Those are times in this person's life where there was no food. They went through a period of malnutrition. And so their body stopped forming enamel and there was a little gap. And then when they got food back again, the body started making minerals, or started mineralizing the teeth again. And again, because you don't get new enamel throughout your life, right? Once your tooth is there, that's it. You just have the enamel that's there. So these things will remain for that person's entire life. And so when we dig these people up in the archaeological record, we can clearly see that they've had periods of malnutrition. There's been periods of starvation when this person was very young, right? And so this is this part of the person's face right here. So it's their the upper part of their mouth. And so this is their front tooth on right here. And then, front tooth. And then the second one, a canine, 2 premolars and 3 molars. But yeah, you can pretty clearly see that they've had periods of starvation or malnutrition in their past. And again, that will be their forever and ever. What were you saying about disease, Nicholas?
Epidemics were more common.
Yeah, in farming communities, epidemics and disease transmission were more common. Why was that?
Because they're close to each other more.
Sure, they're close to each other. There's more of them, right? Hunter-gatherers move in very small groups. Farming villages could be hundreds of people, or maybe even thousands of people, right? Why else do you think disease? What's that?
Pests.
What?
Pests.
Pests. Oh yeah. So what kind of pests?
Rats or something. I saw tuberculosis, so I'm guessing rats.
Yeah. So well, rats. So there's animals around that will transmit disease, but also, what do you think the sanitation situation is here? What do you think? If you have to go to the bathroom, and it's number 2, what do you do in a farming village?
You should have like bathroom or outside your farm.
Yeah, hopefully you have an outhouse, right? You have a place to go. But again, are there any sewage pipes? Is there any clean water? Maybe if you're lucky from a well, but there's no sanitation, right? There's no sewage treatment. There's probably no plan for getting human waste out of people's settlement, right? We take for granted that when you flush the toilet, I know this is gross, but when you flush the toilet, that stuff is gone and you never have to worry about it again, right? But in a farming village, you have to do something with this stuff, right? And you can dig a hole and you can go in the hole for a while and then fill the hole up, but that stuff gets into the groundwater, right? Because those things will percolate through. And so if you're not careful about where you're digging your toilets, yeah, you can get a lot of disease and parasite transmission when you have a lot of people pooping in the same place. And I know it's gross, but it's true, right? Do you think that happens for hunter-gatherers? Yeah.
So what are like leftovers goes
What's that?
now?
Where do they go now?
Yeah. The
They-
ocean.
Well, they go down the pipe and they're collected at a sewage treatment plant where everything is filtered and chemically neutralized, and it's turned into, stuff that is not, not poisonous or dangerous or anything, and then it's the excess water is removed and added back to the river or the ocean. So there's a treatment stage that it goes through first.
Okay, the other thing that's been treated and taken out, what do they do with it?
That I don't know.
Either to the forest or to the ocean.
It is returned to the land somehow. Hopefully in a state that's not, doesn't have a toxic effect on the environment. But something happens to it. I'm not an expert on sanitation and sewage, as you can tell, but something happens to it. But see, that's the beauty, right? You just flush it and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. It's gone, right? But again, in this day and age here, it doesn't go, right? And so, yeah, there's lots of disease transmission. And you can see this. You can see evidence of malnutrition in the bones, but you can also see evidence of disease as well. And so this is someone's skull, okay? And so what you're looking at here, the skull has been sawn in half, kind of around the top. And so you're looking at kind of this part of the skull, so sort of the top side. What's that? It's part of the cranium. And so what you're looking at,
The left side, right?
what's that?
That's the left side.
That's the right side. So there's the frontal bone right there, that little jiggly line there. That's the suture. So there's a frontal suture that goes here. So there's a seam in the bones. And then there's a suture that goes all the way down the back. And so you've got your right parietal and your left parietal. That's the right parietal that you're looking at. And then there's an occiput, I think, which is the bone at the back. And so there's a few different bones that are kind of stitched together to form the entire cranium. But here, you can see that this doesn't quite look right to you, does it? It looks a little bit Swiss cheese kind of thing, right? And it's not supposed to look like that. It's supposed to look like this here. That's how it's supposed to look. But what's happening here is that this person had some sort of chronic disease, okay? And I don't mean like a cold or a flu, because this bone remodeling takes a long time. So this person had tuberculosis or syphilis or some sort of kind of heavy-duty sickness that they lived with for a long time. And when you do that, sometimes your body, in trying to fight it, will borrow things that it needs from your body. So it might borrow minerals from your bones to help fight this disease or fight the infection. And that's what you see happening here. Your body is actually pulling minerals from your bone to fight the infection, and it's showing up in the bones. Again, this doesn't take, this takes a long time. Like, you have to have a disease for like years for this to happen. So if you have a minor illness, doesn't happen. A cold or a flu doesn't affect your bones. If you get something and you die right away, doesn't affect your bones. So this person was living with some sort of disease for a long time and probably passed it on to others too. You can see it here as well. So here's a picture of a human skull, and you're kind of looking into the eye socket of this person. So this is the left eye. And again, this doesn't look right either. So this is inside the eye socket where the eye should be, and it really should be smooth in there. It should be a nice smooth bone. But again, what you see is it's all holy, right? It's all kind of Swiss cheesy, and it's not supposed to look like that. But again, the body is reabsorbing minerals from the bone to fight a serious disease. And it's been happening for a while for this person. Okay, and again, here you can see something happening as well. This does not look normal either. And I think both of these are both from the spine, from the vertebral column. And so you can see the one on this one here is probably from the lower part of the spine. You can tell by how the vertebrae look, and so that might be like your lumbar vertebrae, if you know anything. These other ones are probably a little bit further up, so maybe like mid-back. But you can see they're all holy too, and that's not how these should look. These should look like this top one here. So if you look at the ones on the right, the top right, that's kind of how it should look. And so the top of these vertebrae are kind of smooth, and the sort of area around the outside, they're a little bit rougher. The bone is a little bit rougher, but you shouldn't have big holes going through it. That's not good. So this person was pretty sick as well, and all of these come from farming communities, right, where people had serious diseases, and then they started passing them around because there was a lot of people. They didn't know anything about disease really, and the sanitation was really poor. But you don't see this with hunter-gatherers because A, who are you going to get it from? Right? You're with the same 30 or 50 people your whole life. How is anyone going to get tuberculosis, right? And again, think of sanitation. Most hunter-gatherers don't stay in the same place for any period of time. If you've got to do number 2, you go off in the woods, you do your stuff, and then you keep walking, right? It never gets into your groundwater. You may never come back to this place again. So they don't really have sanitation concerns the way that agricultural communities do. And it takes agricultural communities a while to figure out how to deal with their waste. And so early farmers, yeah, they suffer from some nasty diseases like this. And you can see it. You can see evidence in the bones. So you can see differences in their height, difference in their age of death and their life expectancy. You can see differences in malnutrition with the enamel development of their teeth. And you can see sometimes evidence in their bones if they've been suffering with an illness for an extended period of time. And you see all of this much more frequently with early farmers than you do with hunter-gatherers. In general, hunter-gatherers are in pretty good health. Pretty good health. So, to jump back to my question, where my question was. So, what's the explanation for this, right? So, if we have, if we believe Jared Diamond's argument here, and we say, okay, it seems like agriculture is a big mistake, right? They went from this easy way of life where they had good nutrition and general equality, and people had lots to eat, and they didn't work too hard, and then they switched to this subsistence strategy where they were working harder, they were eating foods that were less nutritious, they had gender inequality and class inequality happening, and all of these health problems. Why on earth would people switch? Time to unpin what you said earlier. So, okay, so it wasn't so much a choice as a necessity, right? Why was it a necessity? What forced them to do this? In some cases, yes, right? So if everyone in your area was turning to farming, it would have been very difficult to stick with hunting and gathering. You'd have to leave and go somewhere else, or you'd just have to start farming with everyone else. So that might be part of it. Why were they forced to do this? Growth in numbers. Give me a little bit more there.
They chose quantity over quality.
Oh, so you're saying population growth is to blame. You don't know?
I thought I saw something.
You did see something like that, but I'm hoping you can explain it. So tell me a little bit about population growth. So as the numbers of hunter-gatherers continue to rise, slowly, but they do, what happens to the food supply? What's that? Yeah, they need more food, right? We've said Mother Nature only provides so much food, right? She only does what she does. And if the population of humans starts to rise, we're going to get to a point where we're exceeding the carrying capacity of the land. Mulder, what was carrying capacity again? You knew the other day.
Yeah, how much resources you can take until the environment around you can no longer support your species.
Right. So the carrying capacity of the land is how many animals, or in this case humans, the environment can support without running out of food. And so as the number of humans goes up and up and up, suddenly food becomes more scarce, right? It becomes more difficult to find. And so what choice do humans have? They can starve, I guess. They can kill off some of their members, but that seems pretty dark, right? Or you can help nature along, right? You can put in some energy and some effort and try to generate more food. And that's probably exactly what humans start to do. And I assume it starts very kind of innocently, right? So maybe you're just sowing some seeds, right? So if you find, I don't know, if you eat a fruit with a bunch of seeds in it, maybe instead of just throwing the fruit away, maybe you take those seeds and you plant them somewhere that you think they might grow, right? Maybe you see a place where some natural food is growing and you just kind of pull out the weeds or try to make a better environment for that plant, right? You start just kind of helping nature along a little bit as best you can, right? But I think the idea here is that the more population goes up, the more that people have to help nature along, right? To try to encourage more food to grow. And over time, eventually that results in people full-on farming, right? Burning down sections of land, planting specific crops in them, and then taking care of those crops throughout their whole life cycle so they can harvest them all at the end. And so, again, I think that's a slow transition, but what you do, of course, is that you put in energy, right? You put in work, and you raise the carrying capacity of the land, right? So all of these carrying capacities have to do with the number of resources that the land can support, but also at a given level of technology, right? So if we're hunting and gathering, the carrying capacity might be here, right? If we're going to farm, well, we might be able to move the carrying capacity up to here. We might be able to feed more people from a certain section of land, right? And that's what people do, and farming can do that. You can feed more people from a given section of land, but that doesn't happen on its own. You've got to put work into it, right? You've got to clear the land and plant and weed and water and keep other animals from eating your crops, and then harvest those crops and process it and store it and then cook it again later. And there's lots of work that has to go into it, but it can be done, right? And so Jared is saying, yes, this was not a great move for us. We were negatively affected by this, but people were kind of forced into it, right? As their populations grew, they could either starve, right, or run out of food and die, or help nature along a little bit. And so it's kind of where it starts. People help nature along, and then they can, as their numbers continue to rise, they have to give more and more help, and then eventually they come to a place where they're fully invested in their farms and fully invested in their crops. Does that make sense? Can you picture it in your head? What? It's what?
Making a film is something.
Good. Yeah, and again, it's probably a long process, right? It's probably a slow process to the point where people are hunting and gathering, to the point where people are, just helping nature along a little bit, to the point where, they're full on committed to farming, right? But Jared says that was a mistake. Whew. Okay. Is that good for today? Let me just see if I had any other interesting photos to show you. I don't think I did. I had those few skulls and vertebrae. No, I'll show you that. Yeah, I think, which one is this, 12? Okay. Good people, that is all I have for you today. So again, on Monday, there's a slim possibility that it's a snow day. Check the website and your email Monday morning just to be sure. If we have a snow day on Monday and we can't come here, it'll be an online class, and we'll bump the quiz to Tuesday because we can't really do it on Monday. But if there's no snow day, we're coming in here and we're doing the quiz on Monday as we originally planned. Okay, that is all. Have a nice weekend. And I'll be here. Yeah, we'll see you all Monday. So, bye.